And we are live. My name is JP Berg, and this is Dumb the Wiser, the show where we try to make sense of a very mad world. As you can see today, we have Mr. Crypto Spartacus with us, the one and only Christopher Horbe. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure. I watched the episode you did of Inlay Terms with my friend Payman Ascari, and I was blown away by it, man. It was sincerely refreshing to see someone who's interpreting this and not just looking to create or foment more division, that's looking to actually have pragmatic solutions. I really like some of your ideas, man. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed that interview with him, so I'm glad you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, it's good. These type of things where there is no script, there's not a bunch of talking points, and you don't have a clear intention. You just kind of let the flow of the conversation go. I think that's why podcasts have become so popular with people, as opposed to the rigidity of like mainstream news or all the other broadcasts. It just seems more informal and more approachable, we'll say.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's also why podcasts are so popular now. It's just it's refreshing to have honest intellectual discourse rather than scripted talking points where you have like a brief period of time to get a little soundbite in.
Yeah, it fails to convey people's true meaning. And like I said, it's with some of these algorithms now, I feel like the whole intention is to fuel the division. It's like if you're not like culture war grifting, or if you're not, kind of having sensational content to foment reactions, then you're just seemingly deboosted. Or the algorithm is favoring the more sensational stuff. But what it's having this effect of kind of consolidating the rage and just fueling these rage cycles.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think just before we went live here, I mentioned that I'm a big fan of Aldous Huxley. And I think his warning to humanity was that we'd reach this point of an ultimate revolution where really the social engineers and the people who manufacture the consent of society would become so advanced in those sciences that the average people would lose the ability to fight back against that sort of system. And really, I think he warned about this in like the 30s, almost 100 years ago, 1930s, he was warning about this. People really don't understand how much they're being manipulated on like a grand scale. And I think these platforms facilitate that to a large extent, like our social media platforms. Really, they are a tool of those social engineers to manufacture the consent of the populace and to keep them fighting amongst each other so that they never recognize that that's really what's happening to them.
Yeah, man, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And it's like I said when we were discussing this backstage that it's more, everyone uses the adjective Orwellian to invoke Orwell as a reference of what we're seeing, but it's far more Huxleyan. And this, like what you said, the two terms manufactured consent and social engineering, people don't understand the profundity of the influence. We were essentially, in my estimation, born into a psyop. We were born into a synthetic reality that is constructed. And it's kept, that sounds so sensational and so counterintuitive to people that aren't awake. I hate to say awake, but that aren't really paying attention to this. But they're just, it's kind of like they're conditioned. It starts with the some of the ideological subversion or the critical pedagogy in their school curriculums. It even starts before that with some of the programming for children now. But then all of these fallacious conceptual framings they're being taught or inundated with are then reinforced with a lot of the media, a lot of the Netflix and programming. Like, it's funny the words they use, a program, because you're not watching a program, you're essentially being programmed or reinforcing some of this programming. But I agree with you entirely, man. And what we're seeing now, this is something now, a lot of people were onto this far before I was. This isn't a revolutionary thought on my behalf, but I realized like the biggest mechanism of our control politically right now in the West is this synthetic right-left divide. I think that we have natural proclivities to lean right and left, and we've been hacked en masse. And that's what we're seeing these algorithms fuel, is that specific division.
Yeah, I mean, I'd absolutely agree with that. And I think it's actually it's very sad to watch because I think there is that natural division where certain people are inclined to be a certain way, and it, rather than forming a harmony with opposites, we've made to repel one another. We've been made to repel, uh, so that we're not complementary. We're not complementary to one another anymore. And it's really because of that divide and conquer strategy that's being played against us that um, we can't find a way to harmonize with people who think differently than us. And I think if we had a more natural social discourse where we weren't being manipulated so heavily, that people would find a way to live in harmony with people who think differently rather than constantly butt heads with one another. And it's really kind of sad to see that society's as divided as it is now on race, religion, politics, all these different things that are used to pit people against each other, when really we share a lot more interests in common than we don't. By and large, the average person, we all share the same interests. We want to have a happy life, prosperous life. We want a better life for our kids. And rather than uniting on those common issues, we are just fighting each other, largely by, again, manufactured social rage, where people who want us to fight each other are promoting that. And I think, again, like I said, these social media platforms are absolutely promoting people who sow division, largely so that we don't unite against the people who are really oppressing us more than anyone else. I think I've chosen the name Crypto Spartacus as my handle here on my YouTube channel and on my social media platforms, because I think in modern times we've been reduced to modern day slaves through our financial system, through banking, and through the issuance of debt by financial institutions that don't even have that money. It's not like a real loan where they're loaning you money from their vaults, giving this money to our government, but through fractional reserves, they're able to just issue debt to our government. And they just promise that we'll pay back this debt that was never in the hands of our creditors to begin with. So if you're just promising that we'll pay back debt that's created from nothing, they're just forcing us to work for these banks who are able to do that. And again, that's why I've chosen the name Crypto Spartacus, so that I think we need to kind of unite as fellow slaves, people who are all being subjected to these same corrupt systems, and really do away with all this division that's preventing us from really addressing the real problems.
Yes, we can have unity without ideological uniformity. I believe, as you do, that we can complement one another with our variance in interpretations. I think, and what we need would be a true free speech digital platform. I think people would be able to solve this right away, and that's why that will never be granted to us. And if we make it ourselves, like we've seen platforms come about that had some free speech, then it just gets controlled. It falls into their control grid right away. But one of the biggest problems, which we already touched on, is it's I hate to use education because that's more reference to an indoctrination nowadays, but it's information. And our electorate isn't low information or no information. They've been misinformed. So, I mean, they have no comprehension of fractional reserve banking. They have no comprehension of the monetary policies that we're subjected to. They don't understand that wealth is created out of thin air and loaned to our countries. They don't grasp those fundamental things that once you learn it, it's not a conspiracy theory. And when you start to tell people, they're so conditioned to utilize that word, that term, as a pejorative. And what they mean when they say conspiracy theorist is crackpot theorist. But I mean, they utilize that. It's almost like they're agent smithing you. It's like once you start to notice the parameters of the matrix, someone will come up like, no, that's a conspiracy theory, but it's not. It's economics, and it's right there to be researched. So what we need presently is to wake people up, and we do. I love the name Crypto Spartacus, and I was really admiring it after I watched your episode, and then I'm thinking, but wait a minute, the Spartacus-led revolution kind of failed. So I mean, I hope ours is better. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to touch on what you were saying there, the thing with education, I didn't learn about how our banking system and our monetary policies work until I was already in university. I was like a first-year university student when I started to discover these things. And I was like 18 at the time. I'm like, how am I just learning this now? This seems like something fundamental to how society works, where money comes from. Everyone spends their whole life more or less chasing money, and we have no idea where it comes from. And I think when you present that to people, like, hey, if you're going to waste your entire life chasing fiat money, you should probably know a thing or two about where it comes from or how it's created and how that system is used to manipulate and control you. And I think it also what you said is correct, that there's uh, it seems conspiratorial to people if they don't really investigate it. And it just kind of causes this cognitive dissonance where that sounds so foreign to them. Like, oh, if that's the way things work, I must have heard, like, there must be, you'd expect more people to be talking about it.
That's right.
But I was quite fortunate at that time that when I was in university, that's around the time that kind of the Ron Paul revolution was happening in the United States. And he was one of the very few people talking about the Federal Reserve System. And again, used the term awake. I think that's actually something that was hijacked around that time, because around that time, that meant people who really understood that the financial system was being used to enslave us. And now it's kind of slid into this woke term, where initially woke was, again, people who were awake to what was happening, how the political system had been corrupted and manipulated through financial interests to take advantage of all of us. And I think there's been a psychological operation for the last 15 or I guess 17 or so years now since that kind of happened, right around the time of Occupy Wall Street and the 2008 financial crisis, to subvert that word to mean something else, to kind of take away the power of that movement. And that term was co-opted to mean something completely different than it used to 17 years ago.
Yeah, 100%. I was aware of that movement, and I remember some of the early online stuff like Peter Joseph with the Zeitgeist movies. Now, there was a lot of fallacies and just not true things in those movies, but one thing they got right was teaching people about the monetary system. And that was what we've seen. We've seen Occupy Wall Street, and we've seen it turn into a psyop. One minute, everyone's like the right and the left. The right and the left. I hate that framing, but they were uniting in realization that it's the integrity of our institutions. It's the integrity of our currency. It's not sound. It's fiat. And people were realizing, you were hearing the 99% and the 1% kind of separation there, but people were becoming aware of that, and that's what happened. It was co-opted, and they started putting these big divisive, I like to use the term like a Penn and Teller misdirection. So they throw up like a trans issue. There's always been occurrences of this within the population. Now it's socially contagious, so it spread, but they're like inundating people with this. And then it's such a sensational issue. And these people that have these natural proclivities to lean right or left, that's a truly divisive one. So that's put to the forefront, and then they kind of have the public discourse going in the direction they want. And then again, we're kept fighting. And if that kind of, while that's waning, they'll throw another one up. And it's just, you're seeing this cycle since then. And it's like, for me, I get the impression that they're just going to keep us fighting at the end of it, because so many people can see this now. And it's like you said, once the digital ID is in place, and I heard RFK Jr. make this point too. He says, like, if we're locked down this time, we might not ever get out. The technocrats, the totalitarians, just the modern day tyrants, they will have at their disposal a control grid that is sufficient to keep us there. And like you said with Huxley, it will be normalized to us. Subsequent generations will be normalized to that tyranny. And it's a really dark, dystopian trajectory that it seems we're on. But I don't know if their arrogance will be their downfall, because like I said, we could see this thing as plain as day now, and they're desperate to silence us. But at the same time, I think they feel that they're too far along for us to prevent it effectively.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they really want to use technology as their end game. Like, these digital ID systems are kind of the end game of that ultimate revolution that Aldous Huxley warned about. But in the same way that you could use a gun for good or for evil, that you could use it for good or bad, these technologies can also be used to preserve our freedom rather than taking them away forever. So, I mean, the other aspect of my name here is Crypto Spartacus. I think things like blockchain technologies, we could use these to restrict the government's ability to control us. And there's a video I'm going to publish later today about this idea of like a neo Magna Carta, that over the course of many thousands of years now, I mean, you said earlier that the slave revolt that Spartacus led, it was ultimately unsuccessful. I think there's been throughout all of human history this cat and mouse game that's being played by people who hold and wield power and the average person who just wants to live their life freely. And I think, like I said, that these digital ID systems are kind of the end game of the technocrats and the authoritarian people who want to wield ultimate power over everyone else. And if we want to fight against those systems, instead of using, back when the Spartacus slave revolt happened, it was force on force. It was violence being met with violence. What we're being threatened with is technology now. They're not threatening us with violence. They're threatening us with technology. And if we want to fight against that, we have to have technological ways of representing ourselves. And really what you said earlier, that these platforms, they largely facilitate the social division. Largely what we do on these platforms is we slave away for the people who own them, and we generate data for them. We're just giving all of this data away. And if we had digital ID systems where we owned that data, again, it wouldn't be so easy to create a digital ID system if to access the data that they would use against you, they needed your permission. So really, I think technology, it holds the key to either our enslavement or our freedom going forward. And people have to figure out that we could actually use these technologies to free ourselves from control rather than facilitating it. And what you said earlier about education, I think the social engineers have been very good at making the public fear digital ID, because they don't realize that if you had a digital ID system that wasn't in the control of these centralized authorities, that it was actually individuals who controlled all of their data. I mean, if your data was stored in a wallet that someone needed your permission to access, then your data can't just be used against you. Really, when we go on these platforms, we use them, and they're free platforms. We're the product, and we're generating an enormous amount of data. I'd like to call them almost they're data plantations, where you're going and using this for free, but you're creating money for the people who own them. And they're not giving you those funds. They're not giving you control over your data. They're just selling it all to third parties, to governments, to whoever really wants to purchase it from them. And it's like a modern slave plantation where you're creating all of this wealth for someone else, and they're not giving you any of it. So you're going and you're really just working on the digital plantation.
I think that's spot on, man. It's like we're training by being in these algorithms, and by interacting with one another, we're training their AI models. To top it off, they're data harvesting for sure. And I mean, it's such a novel concept for me. I really never thought of it. I can't lie to you, man. Like when I heard you say that, like we can actually utilize a digital ID to ensure our sovereignty as opposed to being subjugated. I never thought of that. And I'm immersed in these conversations, right? So it's a very novel concept, and it's refreshingly optimistic. So but without going all, I know you mentioned you're going to be releasing a video explaining your Neo Magna Carta further, but like, give me a broad overview. Like what would this look like? How would people be able to ensure that we were getting that? Like, how would we be able to do it?
So, I mean, if you just generally look, when the Magna Carta was initially sealed by the king, like in the 1200s, I think it only took about 4 months for him to try to get that annulled by the Pope at the time. He was like, all right, I'm going to seal this because like you're threatening to kill me and I don't want my head cut off, kind of thing. But he eventually realized like, hey, I shouldn't have gone forward with this. And they tried to undo it. And I think over the course of hundreds of years, a lot of the clauses within the Magna Carta, they've come to the forefront of the issues that we face today again. Like you can't just create a document and expect the people who sign a document to adhere to it and to not violate that document. Really, we have to have like a technological means of enforcing it. So really, if you're going to have a Bill of Rights or a new digital Bill of Rights, let's say, if you don't want to use the term Neo Magna Carta, I think that's very something that within Commonwealth countries is a good term, because we all adopted the common law legal system from the British. Mm-hmm. If we're in a former British colony, more or less every country who was a former British colony adopted the common law system. I think that's a very powerful kind of idea, that we can use technology to make these documents that enshrine our rights enforceable. And you asked to kind of explain how that would work. Things like excessive taxation. If our government was forced to operate its finances on a transparent ledger, a transparent blockchain system, where every cent of our money is accounted for and is traceable, and you can see exactly how they're spending our money, I think a lot of the corruption that we have would disappear overnight. Or it would just be transparent, and we'd have to throw a lot of our political leaders in prison because we'd see exactly how they're stealing from the public treasury, giving it to their friends, getting these kickbacks in return after they leave office, getting, I don't know, jobs at lucrative corporations and banks after they leave office. And the scale of the corruption that exists is largely going under the radar because there isn't a transparent system where people can just go and see for themselves what's happening. And there's a lot of accounting fraud that happens in our governments at all levels of government, where they kind of cook the books to a certain extent and say there isn't as much debt or as much of a deficit as there is, so that they can kind of hide the scale of the problem. But really, these systems, blockchain system, you wouldn't be able to hide that. So it's really just using a technology to eliminate corruption and fraud to the best of our ability. And I think we wouldn't just be able, it wouldn't be something as simple as getting them to sign a document or signing a new Bill of Rights or signing on to this Neo Magna Carta idea that I have. It would be the cat and mouse game between the people in power, and the rest of us will continue after that. And we have to have kind of a long thought out strategy for how we would enforce these things. So I talk about that a little bit in the video I'm going to publish later today, that it's not going to be as simple as just getting a document signed and expecting them to hold true to their word. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be a continual cat and mouse game where we're going to have to impose technologies on our governments to try to restrict what they're able to do to us, so that they can't force us onto these digital ID systems where they're going to take away all of our freedom. It's going to be a back and forth battle to kind of avoid that fate. And again, these people who have been running the show in our political system for many decades or hundreds of years now, depending on where you are, they're not just going to relinquish power easily. It's going to be something where I think we can't really trust anyone to hold true to their word in the political arena. I don't think it's going to be as simple as electing the right people. I don't think there's a solution through voting at this point. I really think that people have to accept the personal responsibility that nobody's coming to save us through the political system, and that we're going to have to save ourselves. And it has to be something where we're going to have to unite against these authoritarian technocrats in a way that isn't seditious. Because I think as soon as we say, oh, we're going to overthrow the government, they're going to label it as like a terrorist movement, or really any sort of seditious language is going to be used to vilify the people who want to implement a more honest system. So really, I think rather than getting angry and trying to overthrow the government, people would be better off using their energy to eliminate government corruption, so that the parliamentary system that grew out of Magna Carta, that was supposed to represent the average person, although not initially, it was only for the barons and the landlords when the Magna Carta was initially signed. It wasn't even meant for the average person. I think if you look at the political landscape now, the people who hold political authority, the extraordinarily wealthy people in our society are now like the barons and the landlords, the people who own all these assets, who own these different resources, and the bankers who have consolidated ownership over large segments of our society. They're like the modern day barons. They don't hold political power necessarily, but they're all in league with the political authorities now, which is why you don't see many people, you don't see many tech overlords speaking out against these digital ID systems, because really they're going to benefit from it. They may not hold political authority, but they're all in league. They're all shaking hands behind the scenes, and they're all on the same team now. And
I agree. There's been a public-private partnership. It's very evident. And just to touch on some of the things, because you said a lot there, that cat and mouse thing, it's like that perpetual reciprocal dynamic between the people and the ruling class. And it is constant, and it will continue long after that. And what you're saying, I think, is spot on. It still requires a movement. And I believe in psychological warfare. Quite frequently, your reaction is your enemy's true action. And that's the impression I get watching Western politics now. All of the division has been whipped into a fever pitch where they want low resolution people to react poorly or violently. They even want a reason to. I think if there was honest demonstrations, you would have to be very vigilant to ensure that there weren't agent provocateurs that were placed there to spill it into violence. I think that's one of the tools they use. This network is what I call them. But it's definitely an interesting idea. It's like it's ensuring a hyper transparency between the electorate and the public servants. It's funny too, because like I say, it's novel to me. I never thought of it, and it's so obvious once I heard it, and that's usually indicative of something that's true in my estimation. Like once I was like, of course, you're just shifting that. Instead of digital ID being weaponized against the populace, it could be utilized by the populace and weaponized against corruption and the bureaucracy itself. I'm all for it. How can we get more people to learn about this?
Well, I think the idea, I think, will be infectious. I think really once people get that idea in their heads that, wait a second, I could have a technological means of preserving my own freedom to make sure that I actually control all of my data so that it can't be used against me. I think once people get that idea in their heads, it's a hard idea to shake. I mean, I only became aware of that sort of idea a few years ago, but since I heard that for the first time, I couldn't get the idea out of my head. And I'm someone who, again, I became very politically active, or at least aware, around 2008 during the financial crisis. I mean, I would probably say for the last 17 years, I've been thinking almost every day, how do we solve this problem? Because it seems like such an enormous thing that we don't really have a solution to. Even if you see these problems, it's very hard to actually come up with an idea that's going to actually remedy those problems. And I think once people get this idea in their head that we can use technology to solve these problems, it'll be very hard for people to shake those ideas. It'll be very hard to get people to give up those ideas once the seed is planted in their mind.
So a lot of it, obviously, too. I mean, now this is all like kind of just in the political realm. I mean, blockchains is obviously going to be likely the future of currency, which could potentially make it sound again. Is that part of your idea, economic crypto?
Yeah, and I mean, there is a list of problems, and it creates a whole new class of problems if we were to impose blockchain systems on our governments. Like I said, the whole transparent aspect of a blockchain system that comes with its own set of problems as well. It does solve a lot of problems, but it creates a whole new list of problems of its own. So, I mean, people, we more or less, we want to have privacy for ourselves, and we want to be able to see what our government is doing because they're supposed to represent us. There's this idea that they're public servants and that they serve their constituency. But really, it doesn't work that way. It's just kind of become this lie that we're told so that they can maintain the consent of the governed. And I think there's a lot to be said about that we could impose a blockchain system onto our government that's fully transparent, and then maybe try to enact one for ourselves that allows individual people to have a greater degree of privacy for themselves. And again, there's a delicate balance to be struck there between privacy and transparency. I think you kind of want the best of both worlds, where I would love to see every dime of where our government spends money. And I don't necessarily want there to be a public record of how I spend my money all the time. I mean, I generally am someone who I live within the law, but there are certain laws that I think are completely unjust. A lot of the prohibitions around psychedelic drugs. I think I used to work as a paramedic. I think that some of these substances have therapeutic value for people who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think they have a lot of therapeutic value outside of that, but I mean, they're illegal. I don't think that's a just law. If there's no victim, there shouldn't be a crime. I don't believe in victimless crimes. I don't think that if you're experimenting with your own mind, you should be punished for that. I think that's more or less an unjust law that shouldn't be those laws really, they shouldn't exist. I think there's certain limitations there where I don't think you should be giving these substances to children or people who may be harmed by taking them. There's a lot of people who have very bad reactions to these things, so you need to be careful about just saying blanketly that these things should just be allowed in society without any restrictions. But as it stands now, I think it's an enormous injustice. So I mean, if you're someone who uses these substances, you probably don't want an immutable record of your purchasing them, that sort of thing. And again, there's a balance to be struck between privacy and transparency when it comes to both allowing it for the government and for the average person. I wrote a paper about this, or a little article about using blockchain covenants to restrict or to reform government taxation. So, I mean, you might want to see everything that the government is spending our money on. But there are certain things that within like a military point of view, we do probably want to have military projects that potential foreign adversaries don't have a transparent accounting of all of our military spending. So there might be a balance to be struck there where we see the overall amount of money that we're giving to the military, but you probably don't want a foreign nation seeing line by line where every dime of your military expenditures are going, especially if there's projects you don't want foreign nations to know about. So there is a balance to be struck there. I don't think it's safe necessarily to say overall that everything in the government treasury or everything that they spend their money on should be entirely transparent, but we should at least be able to see. I mean, I tried to file a Freedom of Information request a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, to see which financial institutions the government of Canada owes money to and how much we owe to each of those institutions and what the terms of those loans or agreements are. And the response I got back was more or less that they wouldn't tell me. So, I mean, if they're going to take out loans to financial institutions in our names, shouldn't we be allowed to see the terms of those loans? I think that's something that is probably held tightly, because if they did just freely share that information with us, I mean, people wouldn't stand for that. What you said earlier about how people, they don't have this education about the monetary system or the banking system. That's by design, because if we really understood what was happening, we wouldn't stand for it. And we wouldn't be able to maintain this illusion that the government serves us, that they're public servants, because really the financial issue alone, it reveals that not only is the government working against the average person, but that they're all in league with it. That the different political parties, it's not a matter of getting the Conservatives in and they're going to fix things, or the NDP is going to fix the problems created by the Liberals. All of these people are working on behalf of our creditors. And if they weren't, then why wouldn't they object to that system? Especially in Canada, where we nationalized our central bank in the 30s to avoid borrowing money from financial institutions that would just create the loans from nothing.
Yeah, it's systemically or even irredeemably corrupt, our system presently. So I really think we need revolutionary generational reform, not generational debt, as is what we're getting. This generational debt from this government ensures that our children and grandchildren will be indentured employees to the perverse corporation that many still think is a country. I think we're in a state of oligarchy now. There's powerful oligarchs that wield far too much political power, and through their NGOs, they've locked down both parties in these dual party systems, and we're just seeing a puppet show. It's kayfabe, and again, it's fueled the natural dialectic fuels it, this right-left division, and they put these hyper sensational culture war issues at the forefront, so we all just fall in line like sheep being herded. And we fight with one another instead of looking at the institutions. And then you're seeing now, I often say it's like the Overton window has been distorted so much to the left that now we're seeing it distort to a farther right, and we're seeing ethno-nationalism. And it's just like, this is not the way. That is that weaponized reaction. It's like if they're pushing all this anti-white rhetoric, that's undeniable. And there's good arguments that could be made in professional ways against some of the anti-white rhetoric that we're seeing. But I don't believe that standing in military formation with masks on and boots at the CBC is sending that message in an efficacious manner. I think if anything, that can be dismissed by Joe Average. They're going to say, oh my God, like there's a bunch of white supremacists standing out making demands. It's like, and you're watching this happen and everyone's so caught up in it. and I don't know where to begin to explain to them that they're being played against one another. Like, none of it's real. Real's not it's not a substantial term for what I'm trying to say, but it's synthetic. We're being played against one another. This is not what's pertinent. What our ideological uniformity we never required, but we've convinced large segments of the population that we need to, subjugate one another. It's either the right or the left is going to win, and communism is virtually identical to fascism. But what we're seeing is more of like a neo-feudalist system. And all these young men, the people that can enact political change historically, the young people are falling right into this dialectic on the right, and it scares me, man. It scares me far more than watching them fall into the farther left side of it, to be quite frank with you.
Yeah, I share that opinion 100%. I think that it's, again, by design as well. I think there's certain things where they know that they can rile people up with certain emotions, where like people will have an emotional response to what they're promoting, and then they can manipulate people through their emotions rather than through rational thought or rational discourse. And there are certain people, I mean, like people like Nick Fuentes, he's on video calling his own followers useful idiots and mocking the people who listened to him on January 6th, who ended up getting sent to prison for storming the Capitol building, as being useful idiots. And I think there are a lot of people like that now who they exist and they've been promoted by the algorithms in order to foment hatred and foment emotions in people that will get them to go off the rails and kind of fight their fellow man, who are more or less, we're all being victimized by the same political establishment, and rather than unifying against a common enemy, we're fighting each other.
At best, Nick Fuentes was a product of the algorithms. I believe they're all federal agents. I really do. I have Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and all on the other side, the ones that are super pro-Israel. I think we're watching like two aspects of this network feuding with one another without letting us know that like it's all fake. That's just the impression I get. And with Nick Fuentes particularly, because everyone says that he's got a lot of fans. There's a lot of people that watch my show that love Nick Fuentes. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe people are falling for it. I watch him to see what they're trying to program everyone with. That's genuinely how I look at it. But he was there. He's excluded initially, and then they keep him on the periphery. If this powerful network wanted to get rid of Nick Fuentes, they would have truly smothered him in the cradle and not had the Daily Wire kind of exclude him from political discourse, and then have people like Kanye West and Milo Yiannopoulos go with him and keep him relevant. He was kept relevant on the periphery, and he was able to get his message across until they needed him. Then what do you see? Oh, he has this big fake discourse with Tucker Carlson, and then he's interviewed by him. It's like, this is the WWE. That's the impression I get. But so many of our countrymen, so many people in the whole of the West, they believe it's real, and they're getting on either side of these dialectics. And the answer I'm looking for is, how can we shatter that illusion and show them how synthetic all of this is?
Well, I think some of that could also be done by, imposing blockchain. There's certain things that people just don't see behind the scenes. You mentioned Candace Owens. If you look into who Candace Owens' husband is, how they got engaged a week after they met for the first time, that alone is extremely suspicious. Who gets engaged to someone a week after they've met someone in this day and age? But her husband, he's close friends with Andrew Tate. He was a member of this, I forget the name of it, but a fraternity at Oxford, I think, or one of those Ivy League schools in the UK.
He's a British aristocrat. He comes from big families of Britain. And these are the people that still have the influence. And this is the funny thing, where people get stuck in the whole, it's the Jews thing. It's like, what do they think? That the powerful European families don't exist, or the powerful WASPs from America? This is a network of people. And like, again, I get the impression they're at war with one another, clearly. And there's different interests being represented by these various, and they're either, like you said, hapless idiots that are just in the algorithm, and they're useful idiots. They're being weaponized because they have a certain viewpoint, or they're directly working for this factionalized various factions of this network. That's just my impression. And again, I'm saying a lot of this stuff like it's accepted, but I'm there. I would have to be convinced otherwise at this point, but I do realize a lot of people watching us are like, no, bro, Nick Fuentes is awesome. He's telling the truth. And it's like, no, these are destabilization agents. These are intended to prevent us from looking up. They're not there to help you. It's shocking to me that so many people are so susceptible to falling in line with it.
Well, I think the appeal of people like Nick Fuentes is that a lot of what he says is true. Like there are certain things that are absolutely factually true that he's saying, but he's mixing them with emotional appeal to make people fight one another. And it's something where certain truths have been kept out of public discourse so that they can then have an agent who then states the truth and gains a following when they actually bring it into the public discourse. And it's something that's happening by design. I think when traditional media started to lose its ability and its ability to manipulate the public, and it lost its edge. And I don't, but when I was a little kid and before the internet was widely used, everyone watched the same news. Everyone was getting information from a small handful of sources, 5 or 6 companies that controlled the mainstream news outlets. Now you have all of these different news agencies online that appear to be independent, but a lot of them are funded and financed by the same people who controlled the corporate news that existed before. And it's just a way to maintain the stranglehold on the mind of the public, where the social engineers recognized that their old system of controlling the public wasn't working anymore and that they had to adapt to the modern times. And I think a lot of that is putting up fake social influencers who they have this what appears to be authenticity, and they've made people appear authentic who aren't authentic. And that is, again, part of that ultimate revolution, which is very difficult for the average person who's only casually paying attention to recognize. And the people who aren't paying attention at all, they'll just fall for that hook, line, and sinker every time.
And some people, I think, because again, we're temperamentally, so it's like those high in openness and creativity, they tend to lean hard left. And those high in orderliness and conscientiousness, they lean hard right. So, I mean, some people can't help themselves. They're going to go for that stimuli, just as if you threw a ball to your dog. They're going to go after that and they're going to fight. And they don't realize the profundity of the manipulation and how it's being weaponized. So we got about 300 people watching live. I was so into the conversation, I didn't even appeal to the audience to share the room. If you guys could please share the room. There's a lot of authentic voices on social media that are really trying to have sincere discourse and to be interactive and involve a lot of the community in these discussions. But we're underneath these rage baiters. We're underneath these people that are giving the algorithms what they want, which is just rage bait. So if you guys could share this, it's immensely advantageous for us. So we usually go about an hour, Chris. But would it be all right with you if we spent the last 15 minutes going over some of the comments?
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead. I'm free, whatever. We can go a little longer if you want to too. I'm free.
Yeah, we could definitely go a little longer. I love the discourse. Like I say, it's refreshing. I'm usually talking to people that are really into the culture war, and it's everything is left versus right. And that just exhausts me now because I don't see it that way anymore whatsoever. I feel like it's an imposition of tyranny that we're watching. So this is Granddaddy O. Good day, gentlemen. Good day to you, sir. We got Marilyn Walls reposted the stream. Thank you very much. I immensely appreciate that. That's the only way anyone sees any of these videos is by organic reach. So what else do we got here? So we got Gary Helicki, independent journalist Alex Zoltan, generally speaking, a good Canadian kid. However, he continues to shill for the Uniparty. I've heard him deny its existence in live spaces. Someone needs to challenge him to a public debate. I don't know, man. The performative nature of these debates for me, that Mario guy I've challenged publicly. And he just, dismisses me with your typical ad hominem. These people don't want to engage with debate. And I don't know Alex Zoltan. I know his his account here. I'm not sure of what you're saying, but a lot of people, man, I made this mistake initially when I started to see this. I assumed everyone else was being disingenuous, as opposed to just truly being fooled by it, because it's immense, the profundity of this influence. When I say we were born into a psyop, I truly mean that. Like, it's not real, and it takes a lot of searching and a lot of luck, really, too, and a lot of chance to being woken up. You have to meet the right people. You have to read the right things. So, I mean, some people are just, they're not able to see it as effectively. So I'm hesitant to jump on people right away like that. What are your thoughts, Christopher?
I mean, I would agree with that. I think there's a lot of people who they're genuine and they've just fallen for the deception. They really think that things would be better if we just elected the right people. They don't really want to come to grips with the idea that they're all in it against us and there isn't a solution through the ballot box. And I think a lot of that is, like you said, education. One of the people I really respect is a fellow who's died now, but John Taylor Gatto. He was an educator. He worked for an elite private school and then went into a public school system in the Bronx and essentially tried to educate young children in the Bronx to the same degree that people would get at an elite private school. And he ended up getting fired for doing that because essentially you're not supposed to educate the average person to the same degree that these silver spoon children get. President's children don't receive the same education that us plebs get. And again, it's unfortunate that there are really well-intentioned people who just fall for the deception. And it's really hard to show people the truth because it requires a certain degree of humility where you have to accept that you've fallen for a lie, that you've bought this lie. There's a great film that I would always recommend to people. It's called The Jones Plantation. It was made by Larkin Rose. He spent many years, I think, trying to get the funds together to make this, and then during the pandemic, they filmed it. It's a really great film, and I think the big problem is because people have these emotional responses to things that they don't want to accept are true. You can't just explain it to them. If you just ration it through to people and try to reason with them, it doesn't get through to them because they just put up these emotional blocks. They have this emotional response that prevents them from thinking it through rationally.
Well, you said it right, man. It's humility. It's the ego prevents them from seeing it. Everyone derives like a lot of security from this premise that they understand what's going on. And I really think that it's not just cognitive dissonance, it's fear. It's like a fear, and it equates, in my estimation, to humility. I mean, it's the only way to see it. And like I told you before we started, and this is, in my estimation, the only reason I have 30,000 followers on X was because I was culture war grifting. I lean kind of right. I have that bias. And I was on social media and I was responding with what I thought was logic to something I thought was illogical, but not realizing that it goes beyond that because it's kind of a synthetic division that they have us all participating in. They've convinced one side that it's the other side that wants to subjugate them. And neither is accurate. It's top-down authority we're seeing. And it's very similar to what happened in the 1920s. It's like this dialectic, this conservatives and liberals, or the right and the left, became fascists and communists. And that's like the point where we're at now. Like, you're actually seeing it go that far. And I really think cooler minds need to prevail.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that too that I think it's because that because the political system wields so much control over our lives now that people have this very strong emotional reaction to going along with the political system because they don't want the other side to control their lives. The people on the left don't want the people on the right making decisions for them, and the people on the right don't want people on the left making decisions for them. My idea is that we shouldn't have a government that has the power to control everyone like that. That really, if you had a system that allowed everyone to live freely without one side imposing their will on the other, I mean, that's really the root of the problem, is that we shouldn't have a system where half of the population can force the other side into bending to their will, really you should have a system where everyone is allowed to pursue their will freely, and that they shouldn't be they shouldn't have some opposing opinion or some opposing political ideas enforced on them. That if you had a system that granted people the freedom to do whatever they wanted without having, I don't know, their tax dollars stolen from them and given to the other side to do things that the other side wants to do with it. I think that's another thing that if we used technology to limit what our government did, you could have a system where you opt into government services. So if you had a transparent blockchain that all of our government's accounting was held on, you could opt out of government services. Like, oh, I don't want public health care, so I'm not going to contribute it. I won't sign up for that. And then I think every government service could become something like a GoFundMe, where if you don't want government health care, you'd prefer to have a private health insurance system, then you'd be free to do that. I think forcing the government's will on everyone is what the root of the problem is as well. You should be free to do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting other people, committing fraud, or stealing from them. Basically, you should be free to live however you want. If we created a system that facilitated that, then you would eliminate a lot of this division, because people wouldn't have a vested interest in participating in the corrupt political system if it didn't wield so much power over our lives. And really, I think the way of backing out of this, instead of having increased polarity between people who have, like you said, a certain inclination to one way or the other, then you could actually allow people on both sides to live freely without forcing their will on one another. That's a much better vision for society, I think, than the one that is facing us now, where it's just going to be this constant back and forth battle where we're always struggling to wield power and authority over one another. It's not in our interest. It only serves the people in power who benefit from that.
And it's not even like one side actually gets the edge over the other side. It's still controlled by the oligarchy. And this is just a way to fuel their control. I believe it's just distractionary.
Yeah, the illusion of choice.
That's right. And it's we can have unity without uniformity. You wouldn't want to live in that world. You really wouldn't. I know you think you do because everything's hyper polarized right now. I'm speaking to the audience, but you wouldn't want to live in a world where everyone thought and felt exactly like you. It would be boring. It would be a form of hell, I believe. But we're winding down now. There's not too many questions, oddly enough. I don't know if StreamYard is giving me them because we got about 358 people watching, but I don't think I'm getting them all. But that was a great conversation, Christopher. I would love to have you back again to talk deeper. I think we could go for hours. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you? And I'm looking forward to your video today. Maybe after you do post it, you can go back to this thread and share it under the video,
Sure.
just so people can watch it themselves. But yeah, drop all of your where you could be found.
So primarily, you can watch my videos on YouTube. It's Crypto Spartacus there as well. On X, it's Crypt Zero Spartacus. So the same thing, just the O in crypto is spelt with a zero. So Crypt Zero Spartacus on X. That's primarily where I'm active. If you want to reach out to me in any way, you can reach out to me in those places.
Awesome. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. And I want to appeal one more time, since I didn't do it through the conversation. If you guys could share and repost this stream, send it to anyone you think might enjoy this type of a conversation. It's immensely appreciated and very, very advantageous for us. Thank you guys for tuning in. My name's John Paul Berg. This is Dumb the Wiser. Cheers.